So now I'm going to do this exercise with a pair. Actually, the pair is an exercise that is done in the academies nowadays, traditional academies, because for certain reasons. We do first one pair that you use the time that you need for to finish the painting, and then you do one in one session, which means alla prima. So basically you paint at once to practice that, the way of painting, and then you do one by memory, on which you cover the real pair, and then you do painting just by memory of what you remember from those two exercises before. And the pair has an interesting shape, and so basically the idea here is to put in practice all the knowledge that you got through drawing. So the drawing program. So basically here we're using natural light, and you try to find interesting shapes on the pair. And here I put the setup a little bit higher. As you can see, I put black boxes just to avoid the reflections, and I put a little bit higher just so it's on the same eye level, so that's better for the perspective. And basically I also put the board, try to put it straight, like vertical. So and so it's vertical enough, and then ideally the surface goes kind of halfway through the setup. And one thing that is important here is that since the object now is a real object, I'm not going to try to measure it from here. I'm not going to come here and measure it. It wouldn't even make sense, because the line kind of goes through like halfway through the pair. So basically I'm going to give a few steps back, and then I'm going to measure basically by distance, just like this. I'm not going to come here and do the measurements here. And basically you start right, just like putting the top and the bottom, and so it's just few single measurements, not much. But it's important that you remember that you're not going to draw or paint here, because when I'm here, my perspective is this. It's kind of the side, the 3/4 of the pair. And actually I'm going to draw the front side of the pair, which I chose from there, where the light is good and the shapes are good. So it's important that you remember that you see from the distance, and then you come and draw here. But you're not drawing from this perspective. You need to step back and see the pair, and then come close, and then make your markings on the paper. So, as I mentioned in the previous lesson, you can see that the basic principles are the same as I use for the drawing of the ape or human figure. And then you start thinking as soon as you can about shapes, right? You divide the shadow shapes from the light shapes, the light areas, whatever shadow areas you have, just separate them both. And little by little you go building up the values, right? The value scales. You start separating more just the light areas from the shadow areas with simple values, and then you go increasing the information and making darker areas and half tones and everything until you have a more separate, a better separation between the lights and the shadows. And you can see, for example, I actually did two drawings here, because the first one I just wanted to show the first initial stage, so I just basically mapped the light shape and the shadow shapes, and then I did in the second one where I did a second drawing where I kind of went a little bit further, just so I could then save the first stage, and then have the second one that's a little bit more finished. It's not actually a very finished drawing, but just enough for this exercise. Alright, in this second exercise, I developed a little bit more to drawing than the first one. This first one is basically a mapping of the shapes, right? The shadow shapes, you see here, the halftone shapes, and the light area, the light shape. And this one here, I developed a little bit more the values. And it's not a real finished drawing, but it's basically also a mapping of the shapes, but with a little bit of values, a little bit of tones. I divided basically in 3 tones, the light areas, the half tones, and the shadows here a little bit more. I pushed them a little bit more. And I'm not drawing like reflected lights, for example, because this is a preparatory drawing for the painting. I did put, for example, a little bit of white chalk in here just for the highlight, but it doesn't really need to be a finished drawing because this is just a study, a preparatory drawing for the painting, right? And basically I try to use a little bit of edge quality too, so this line here is a little bit sharper because it's on the light area, so it brings the focus to the light area. I even put a little bit of background, and those edges around here, around the shadow, close to the shadows, they are quite soft and a little bit lost to the background because then they bring the focus out of these areas, right? The soft edges in comparison to sharp edges. I don't want to bring the attention to the shadow areas, but rather to the light areas here on the top. So that's why those lines here are a little bit sharper. And those around here on the bottom, they're a little bit softer. And this creates an idea of three-dimensionality, even in such a simple drawing. So this light area here, it shows that it receives more light, for example, and the areas, that bottom area that is on shadow is a little bit softer. So this drawing, you can use it to transfer to the canvas to paint using tracing paper, but I'm just going to start drawing straight to the canvas with the paint when I start painting this pair. But you can use this one also to trace it to the canvas so you have a more precise drawing when you start painting.